en su productividad de forma sostenible, sino que además aumenten el valor agregado y se desarrolle una industria atractiva para los jóvenes y con salarios atractivos. Sin duda, invertir en este sector contribuye a la restauración de los ecosistemas, la estabilidad de los mercados y el bienestar de las comunidades, asegurando que los recursos lleguen a quienes más lo necesitan, pero insertándonos a los mercados de tal forma que salgan permanentemente de la pobreza. La estrategia que hoy presenta la CAF es un paso clave en esta dirección. Diversos esfuerzos multilaterales también están impulsando este proceso y que se complementa con esta estrategia. El Plan para la Seguridad Alimentaria y Nutrición y Erradicación del Hambre de la CELAC 2025 y la Alianza Global contra el Hambre y la Pobreza del G20 Brasil, que también la CAF es parte de ella. Y además otras iniciativas que buscan fortalecer la seguridad alimentaria y resiliencia del sector. Los sistemas agroalimentarios son fundamentales para garantizar el derecho a una alimentación adecuada y a veces olvidamos eso. Los sistemas agroalimentarios nos dan los alimentos y como toda cosa buena que hacemos, también generamos externalidades al ambiente, a los suelos, al agua. Pero sin agricultura no hay alimentos y sin alimentos no hay desarrollo. Aunque este sector ofrece grandes oportunidades para el crecimiento económico y la generación de empleo y la promoción de prácticas sostenibles, sigue enfrentando desafíos en el financiamiento y la inversión. Es por eso que felicitamos la importante iniciativa de la CAF y el significado que realizarlo en la oficina regional de la FAO, materializando acciones de colaboración conjunta bajo nuestro reciente memorando de entendimiento firmado en el 2024. América Latina y el Caribe es una de las pocas regiones, si no la única, que aún tiene la oportunidad de alcanzar el ODS 2 del hambre cero. Lograrlo dependerá de nuestro trabajo conjunto y nuestras acciones. Agradecemos nuevamente a la CAF por su compromiso con el desarrollo agropecuario en la región y por trabajar conjuntamente con nosotros. Reafirmamos nuestra disposición de continuar trabajando para garantizar un futuro más próspero, equitativo y sostenible a través de una mejor producción, una mejor nutrición, un mejor medio ambiente y una mejor vida sin dejar a nadie atrás. Y por supuesto, asegurando mejores alimentos para hoy y para mañana. Muchísimas gracias y deseando el mayor éxito de esta estrategia.
Muy bien, seguimos ahora con las palabras.
Well, now we continue with Eve Crowley from FAO Latin America and the Caribbean and representative of FAO in Chile. Welcome.
Distinguidas autoridades y asistentes que nos
Distinguished
acompañan
authorities and attendants, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you and I join the words by our head economist, Máximo Torero, globally, but also the regional representative for Latin America and the Caribbean that shows the urgency and the relevance of the strategy for the region. I would wish to welcome you to our home, your home, the House of FAO, our new renewed offices in Latin America and the Caribbean, and that in less than a year, we inaugurated the new building, which is a wager in favor of sustainability, innovation, and joint commitment that we represent as a UN organization focused on the transformation of agriculture. We believe that this will CAF strategy for agriculture is essential. With CAF, we have traveled a path together, and we have similar initiatives to further food security and the development of the agricultural sector, nutrition, and well-being of rural communities. Sustainable development, always promoting an ample participation by different players, women, young people, small farmers, indigenous people, everyone who plays a very important role in the sector, always generating tools that are necessary to further more transformative processes. And also, I would like to thank the government of Chile simply for hosting FAO and CAF and several other international organizations. This generous hospitality has helped us to make visible the progress made by Chile in food security, nutrition, and agricultural development. In fact, it is an example for many other countries of the region. This year, for us, is emblematic. It is 80th anniversary, and we will celebrate this on October the 16th, which is the date of our foundation. And I believe this type of collaboration allows us to reflect a little further on what we've done in the past, the achievements reached, challenges overcome, and what is left to do, and the legacy represented by the right to food and agricultural development that is sustainable, that we would like to leave for present and future generations, and that we've also left for past generations. We've had much progress in the region, and it is a matter of great inspiration regarding what could be done in the coming period. And so I hope this space will strengthen our commitments and coordination for joint action. And I thank you for coming today to this very important event for the agricultural sector in the region, and I am sure we will shape new strategies based on this strategy that translates into concrete actions with benefits for the states of Latin America and the Caribbean and its population. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Yves. Bueno,
Thank you very much, Yves. Next, we will have the reflections by the Executive President of CAF and Ministers of Agriculture of the region about the strategic approach for the agricultural sector of our region. First of all, Mr. Sergio Díaz Granados, Executive President of CAF, who is going to address the audience.
Muy buenas tardes, un saludo muy
Good
especial
afternoon.
a
Special greetings to Esteban Valenzuela Bantrec, Minister of Agriculture of the Republic of Chile. I want to thank the words by Máximo Toledo, Director General of FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean, Alfredo Frati Silveira, Minister of Livestock, Agriculture and Fishing of Uruguay, also Evelyn Crowley, representative of FAO in Chile, Gonzalo Uriarte, President of the Association of Food and Beverages of Chile, the Executive Vice President of CAF, Gian Pedro Leoncini, Corporate President of Strategic Programs of CAF, Mr. Gazzinelli, the Vice President of Private Sector of CAF, Mr. Silveira, Alicia Montalvo, Manager of Climate Action, Julián Suárez, representative of CAF in Chile, Pablo Bartos, Manager of Social Development of CAF, José Guajardo Reyes, Director of SAC Chile, members of the Diplomatic Corps, multilateral agencies accredited in Chile, Joaquín Arias, Coordinator of the Observatory of Public Policies of Agro-Food Products, João Lentini, representatives of the Association of Beverages and Foods of Chile, special guests, and all of those who are by streaming. I would like to thank especially FAO for welcoming us. A couple of years ago, we were in the same auditorium with Mario Lubetsky, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay. We spoke about the importance that development banks were coordinated in the region with organizations such as FAO. We spoke with Mario that we're going to work on a strategy. We're going to launch it from here. Time went by and we meet the purpose. We had just started 3.5 years ago. I haven't been for a month in the bank. We visited FAO in Rome, speaking with the Director General. And in the midst of the pandemic, we discussed the importance of the sector for economic reactivation, for closing gaps in different areas, everything that was mentioned at the time by the representative of FAO. And the UN will be 80 years, and it is an important milestone of multilateral action. So we have to redouble efforts for more commitment for sustainable development, prosperity, and dignified life to all. This vocation, I would say, of FAO and CAF of being a platform, a partner for the whole region is shared in CAF. We were born 50 years ago. I spoke about it this morning. It was the effort of 6 countries from Venezuela to Chile to be part of the Andean area. And in these 57 years, we have become a continental bank, a bank that covers more than 23 countries of the region, Central America, the Caribbean, South America. It is a public good, maybe the most important one that is being created in the last 60 years in the region, which is covering different fronts. The founders never imagined when they created it, they call it like that. It was like the Andean Corfo. Was a way to explain it, but we became a bank that, besides providing funding to initiatives of infrastructure, etc., we have included more and more areas that are important for the region. Creative economies, tourism, closing gaps through more inclusion, protection, and preservation of the strategic ecosystems. And additionally, there are a series of projects and programs in the last 30 years that have been for the agricultural and livestock sector, tertiary areas, risk, funding of private sector. So we have been working on it in the last years, but what we needed was to understand the moment we're living in, to do a much more coordinated effort that was much more comprehensive, and that allows to be aligned with other institutions that are in the region, so as to do something much deeper, as we have this partnership with FAO, also with the ICA in San Jose, Costa Rica, also partnerships with universities, associations from the private sector, to mobilize the private sector, to mobilize third-party resources, and be able to put more resources at the service of the region. We have undergone a process to expand our green financing, which has a goal by 2026 of 30%, but last year we reached 40%. So we have to sustain that effort. Within that context, Chile is a regional example. In our portfolio, we beat a record. Almost 60% has had a direct impact on green funding. That's why it has a lot of sense launching this strategy of having more understanding of the agro-livestock sector. I'm going to explain some of the elements present in this strategy. But before, I want to remind you that the net exports of the region in agricultural matters were the highest than any other region, more than $238 billion. Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Uruguay, Costa Rica, just to name some, are at the forefront of production. In 2024, those exports include not only soy, wheat, banana, beef, but also flowers, and go from big companies and small companies, direct, indirect exporters. There is another sector that is very, very potent that can keep growing. Latin America feeds more than 30 billion people in the world. There are the investment in the rural sector closes gaps. So we are committed to fine-tune our programs, instruments, and we should anchor this in two key aspects. Number one, safety, justice, and sustainable agro-livestock production and prosperity. Next Thursday, we want to present this new strategy of prosperity based on those three pillars. Number one, integral prosperity. Number two, sustainable, resilient, regenerative agro-livestock production, and then nutritional and food security. Why prosperity? It's not enough just to generate more investments or employment. We want to highlight the many growers from all over the region. The representative of FAO pointed out that it's important to attract youngsters to the countryside. I'm going to repeat this. Latin America and the Caribbean have an aging trend in their population, which is affecting mostly the rural world. We had rates of population growth close to 100% between 50 and 60. We have gone down to 60% in the 70s and 80s. And now we're growing at an average 9% in Latin America and the Caribbean. So we have less and less children in Latin America and the Caribbean. Youngsters that do not work or study, and an increase in the number of elderly with no access to pension. And there are also the challenges of the rural world, the population that is aging, that is not attracting young people, and where there are less and less children. So we want to reactivate the rural area so that it is not just something of the past, but the synonym of a prosperous reality connected with progress and in a close relationship with nature. That prosperity will lead to a new relationship with the urban aspect, having something much more integrated. In the last board meeting we had in El Salvador, and the one that we're going to hold in Chile, and the next one, we will have approvals of programs that will deal with more infrastructure, accelerate energy transition, increasing productivity, and also the water and sanitation systems. And in the case of water, we have announced in the past, and we are meeting our commitment as far as water security, almost $4 billion between 23 and 26. And we have several requests to start expand or structure watering areas. And as it was mentioned in the beginning of the debate about natural disasters, we have a challenge in Latin America, which is the aging of our hydraulic infrastructure for irrigation and drainage. And there is an urgent need not only to build more, but update what we already have, because we are facing the stress of climate change that translates into more rainfall, more drought. Anyway, events are more intense and put to test not only what we do not have and what we have, our current infrastructure. Therefore, this is the second reflection. Why sustainability? Climate change is an inescapable reality, and those extreme events of drought, hurricanes, rainfall are no exception. They are part of our daily living, so we have to see cases such as extreme droughts as 2023. This affected Argentina and Uruguay with losses close to 3% of the GDP. In the case of Paraguay, losses close to 4% of the GDP. In the module of natural disasters, as an average, the region has lost a mean of 1.7% of GDP just because of natural disasters, which are basically water crisis, floods or droughts. So these are the central elements of this strategy. Sustainability. And finally, another pillar we want to deal with is the nutritional and food security that was mentioned by the representative of FAO CAF signed the Alliance Against Poverty and Hunger. We were the first ones to do it, and we offer our capability of funding for that task. We have a region which is the first net exporter of food, and also a region where millions of people suffer from hunger. 28% of the population suffer from a certain kind of food insecurity. And this affects Afro and indigenous populations the most. So prosperity means not only being integral, but also that is sustainable and at the same time has be in the hearts of people, in the most vulnerable people of Latin America and the Caribbean. This comprehensive approach will help us identify the weakest links and contribute to their improvement. We want to accelerate investment in this sector, going from 4.3 to close to $5.5 billion in the next 2 years, reaching $8.5 billion in 2030. This implies that in the next 5 years, we should be able to double the cumulative investment of CAF for agro priorities. This is the challenge of the private sector team, Fernando Cubillos, Tony Silveira, Claudia Flores. I'd like to thank them for their commitment with this document. I want to thank the whole team because they have worked a lot for the figures to match. And the FAO is essential. AICA, the Association of Food and Beverages, partnership with the private sector. This happens everywhere in the public sector and also in the private sector. And of course, we will do this by developing new knowledge, updated knowledge through our report on economy and development that is at its 20th anniversary. And the next year, that report will be centered on the rural world. The economy and development report wanted to be focused on the rural world. This will help to improve the documents on the side of the bank. So from now on, with this new strategy, all of the areas of the bank are at the disposal of the countries of the region to build together this agricultural prosperity. We know that the fertile ground of Latin America will keep offering solutions to the main challenges that are posed to us at this time in our history. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Sergio.
Thank you very much, Sergio, for those words. Now, we invite Minister of Agriculture of Chile, Mr. Esteban Valenzuela, is going to address the audience.
Recalcó algunas palabras.
You highlighted some words. So I will be brief.
Ese triángulo que usted lo resumió muy bien.
You summed this up very well. Agriculture that is inclusive, well-being for everyone, and with a lot of public-private cooperation with peasants associations, environmental organizations, with a fraternal approach, looking for profit, yes, but benefit for others. The government proposed something that hurt, scared off one part of the agriculture. It proposed a strategy for security, for food sovereignty. And immediately, what we needed was that sovereignty was not autarky. Chile, since it exists, has exported. We're a small country, but the main fresh fruit exporter from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. And our vision is to continue with the natural conditions that we have, the genetic work and innovation and collaboration. We have learned from many international agencies and universities from throughout the Americas in this process. And for us,
De lo hondo hasta que duela, decía un jesuita en Chile, ¿no?
A
El padre
Jesuit
Hurtado.
said in Chile, Padre Hurtado,
Acordamos con los
we
gremios, con
agreed with the
varias cosas en
associations
común.
and GAs,
Ahí nos
several
obligamos
things in
a
common.
decir,
We say
soberanía es cuidar
sovereignty is
los
caring
bienes que tenemos,
for the
el paisaje
goods that
rural,
we
los
have,
suelos,
the
los
rural
bosques,
landscape, the soil, the forests,
el sector apícola.
the
Entonces tomamos camino,
bee
¿no?
sector. So this is
Dijimos
a
no
path.
paraquat,
We said
pero fue una
no
decisión nuestra,
paraquat, but that was a decision of
dialogada,
ours, and it
de
was
evitar
discussed.
los
The idea
pesticidas
was to
más tóxicos
avoid the more toxic
y a su
pesticides,
vez ser
and in
eficiente,
turn, we want to be
ser
efficient,
rápido en respuesta, en alternativa,
quick in response,
como algo
alternatives
fundamental.
as something that is
Nuestro
essential.
gremio, además,
Our
pequeños y
God
grandes
is
agricultores,
small and great agriculture.
respiran en coherencia entre la
Breathe in
conversación pública y
coherence
privada.
between the public and private
La agricultura en
conversation.
Chile
And
no es
agriculture in Chile
antimigrante.
is not
La
anti-migrant.
agricultura en
On the
Chile
contrary,
se
agriculture in
atrevió
Chile
frente a las
dared,
voces que
before the
lindan con
voices
lo xenofóbico, se
that
atrevió a decir,
border with
si no es
xenophobia,
por las
it dared to
trabajadoras
say if it
bolivianas
were not
y
for
de
the
muchos
Bolivian
países,
workers
no
and
habría
of so
cosecha de
many
la fruta en
countries,
Chile.
there would be
Entonces, un
no
sector
fruit harvest
que
in Chile.
busca
So a
transparencia,
sector that seeks
verdad
for
e integración, y
transparency,
ahí estamos,
truth, and integration,
mejorando
and that's
de
it.
manera
There we are,
notable las
improving
relaciones con
remarkably
nuestros
our
países hermanos
relations
de
with our sister
Bolivia y
countries of
buscando
Bolivia and
sistemas de
looking for systems for
integración y
integration,
prosperidad.
integration and prosperity.
Segundo,
Second,
la buena alimentación.
good
En
food.
eso Chile tiene
In this sense, Chile
errores estructurales.
has structural
Los
errors.
tenemos. Yo creo que
We do have
los
them.
buenos
I think
compartir palabras es
it's
también
good to
reconocer
share words
la
and
brecha.
recognize the
No ha
gaps that
habido
we
caso
have.
que Chile
There,
pase de un
there
sistema
was no
tributario
way of getting
muy
Chile from going from
cargado
a tax
al
system
IVA y al
very
consumo
much
a uno que privilegie la renta, como
tending
son los
towards
países de alto
VAT to
desarrollo.
another moving towards
Para
income
añadir
like the more
algunos elementos
developed countries, in
positivos, ¿no?
addition to certain positive elements.
Hay mayor cobro de impuestos a los vicios.
There are higher taxes on vices of all types, yes.
Tenemos que lograr
But
la gran contradicción que Torero lo dijo muy bien
Torero
y
said
que
this
Eve
very
Crowley
well,
nos
and that Eve
repite
Crowley
como
has
mantra
repeated
todos los
as a
meses.
mantra every
¿Cómo es
month.
posible que Chile,
How is
como
it
todos
possible
nuestros
that
países, siendo
Chile,
grandes
as
exportadores de alimentos,
all
el
other
acceso
food
de alimentación
exporting
sana
countries,
de los
the
sectores
access to
populares
healthy
y de las
food
capas
by
medias bajas
working
en
people
económico
and
sea
low-income
una brecha
families
importante en nuestro país.
is a
Estamos en
tremendous
marzo,
gap in
este
our
es el
country.
inicio
We're in the month of
del año
March.
escolar.
This is the
Entonces,
beginning
la
of the
gran
school
tarea que
year,
tenemos
and the
como
big
ministerio,
task
como
that we
país,
took on as
es cómo
ministry and
logramos
country
que
was
la alimentación
how can we
sana
get
llegue
healthy
en su
food
pluralidad, en su diversidad,
in its plurality and
que llegue a los
diversity?
colegios
How can we
y no
get it to
tengamos
reach the
con
schools?
Estados Unidos
And
y México
And in the
en los
same way
países
as
de la OCDE
USA and
aparecemos como los tres
Mexico and the
países con
OECD
mayores
countries, we
problemas de
appear with the
mala
three
alimentación.
countries with
Es ser
the
integral,
most
pero
serious
requiere
poor
también
food
trabajo
issues.
de ser
But
proactivo, de tener
we must be
trazabilidad
proactive.
y
We
de
must have
buscar
traceability.
aquello.
We need to pursue that.
Creamos con la oficina de planificación
With the
algo
planning
importante que se llama
office, we
mejores
created
alimentos de
something
temporada.
important called
Y
better
estamos
seasonal food.
visualizando eso
And we're
con todas las
visualizing
maneras
this
y
with in
buscando,
all
por
different
cierto,
ways, and of
que
course,
el Estado también predique con el ejemplo y
seeking
a través
the
del PAE,
state, the
el programa
government,
de
to
alimentación
preach through
escolar, que es muy
example,
grande.
and with PAE, the
Finalmente,
school food
lo que
program.
ya se ha dicho,
And what has already been
sustentabilidad.
said,
Y aquí
sustainability.
nos pueden ayudar,
And here you can help
porque,
us
bueno, en esta
because
misma hora,
at this
en Chile
same
el
time
tema
in
de
Chile,
incendios muy fuerte,
the
vientos
theme
sobre
of
100 kilómetros
fires,
por hora,
strong winds of over 100 kilometers per
muy
hour,
afectada una
and
zona del país
one
donde hay
part of the
mucha
country
industria
was
forestal
highly affected, where there is
y
a
mucha
tremendous
sembradío de
forestry
trigo,
industry in a lot of wheat
particularmente
sown,
Ñuble, Biobío
particularly
y la
Ñuble,
provincia de
Biobío, and the province
la provincia de Malleco en el caso
of
de la
Malleco,
Araucanía.
in the case of Araucanía.
Hemos avanzado con que muchos
We
de
have
los
moved
primeros
ahead Many of the mills in the peasant innovation programs, we work with young people. And here we have the INDAP that created a program for young rural people. And we're seeking to include good practices. And also, if Bawalika collaborates with rice, with less use of water, with resilience, good environmental practices. But the landscape is structurally tragic. And what we need is to include regenerative livestock breeding. We have a seal called conscious cattle rearing because public-private confidence permeated the agricultural sector, the milk, the dairy sector. It used to be the milk and then the rice and the oats. Chile is doing well in renewable energy, but it is doing awfully badly in plant waste and food waste. We have a lot to do there. There is a tremendous gap. And so, viva CAF! Hooray for CAF! We need to look for things to help us with this. How can we transform our systems in these most vulnerable areas to be efficient systems, but also resilient to climate change? Not only large-scale work, but agroforestry, live and green. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ministro Valenzuela.
Thank you, Minister Valenzuela. And we had announced Marta Carvajalino, who is the Minister of Agriculture of Colombia, who sends her greetings, but unfortunately could not be here. So we will continue with the strategic view from the agricultural sector in the region. And so we invite Mr. Albedo Frati Silveira, Minister of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries from the Republic of Uruguay. Welcome.
Señor presidente de CAF,
President of CAF,
autoridades de FAO,
authorities, FAO, ICA, Minister of Chile, you too are to blame for us being here. Not only CAF who invited us so kindly, but we are here with the people responsible for health and forestation and water resources, because we have a lot to say and learn from you, because we are fanatical defenders of regional integration. We need to care more about each other, see each other eye to eye, and talk about the market. I'm saying this because recently we met with the minister at CELAC, and we are in these things, and I was surprised on how in Central America imports a number of products from the other side of the world when we are so much nearer, and there are things that are incomprehensible. And all the forums that I've been part of in my life, at least when it is linked to political life, I never saw something like this. So anyway, I congratulate you. A strategic approach to the agricultural sector. I never saw an international agency proposing something for the agricultural sector. It's always the last one left in the bucket. So for me, it is a pleasure to address you within this framework of dialogue and collaboration that offered by CAF. And this is a space to reflect on the future of our region. As Uruguayan, as someone deeply linked to the countryside, not only as a profession, but also my origins, I would like to share with you some things that stem from experience and is projected towards the future. But first I would like to say, because you mentioned it, Minister, Uruguay produces for 30 or 40 million people food. But today, we have something that hurts our soul. We have more than 20% people who live below the poverty line. and with a demographic problem. We also have people that are affected by malnutrition. That is totally unacceptable for a country such as ours and others in Latin America. The agricultural sector in our countries is far more than an economic driver. It is an essential part of our identity, our history, and our future, and also has to do with our sovereignty. In the last survey, we get 4% of our population in the countryside. That is, this is what allows us to occupy the territory. And when Mujica said, at least someone should be there if a flying saucer decides to land. Work and living, a way of life, but also a seen life, far more friendly, far more empathetic with the neighbors, source of life, well-rooted, but we recognize that the challenges are great. Climate change, as was said here by the President, 20 years the scientists have been saying this, and we did not understand. Each time they're going to be deeper and more frequent, and we found it difficult to prepare. Climate change, the increasing demand for food, and the need for sustainable development oblige us to rethink our models of production. And within this framework, I was recently appointed as the Minister of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, and the agribusiness sector is a pillar of our economy, representing a large part of our exports and generating jobs for thousands of Uruguayans. It continues to be agribusiness that gives greater work, at least in our country. The main programs presented when I came in were focused on agriculture by increasing production, industrialization, and export. We seek to ensure access to water, a vital resource for production and consumption, and propose policies that support family production, rural development, agroecology, and gender equity. It is essential to focus, for us to focus on livestock rearing, because it all represents almost 2/3 of our territory. And this is what we've done best. Since before being a nation, the challenge is to improve income by increasing production based on more calves and moving ahead in sanitation. Continue with dairy development, agriculture, forestry, with a major emphasis on national industry. This is the same thing. We are far from feeling satisfied. But also we speak of strengthening orchards, which is not exportable in our country, yes, but it does have to do with ensuring food for our co-citizens. So agriculture, same as in furthering the National Institute, and in the last administration lost impetus. But it's important because it gives land to farmers. And with this problem that we find so difficult to resolve, settlements in large cities, but if you ask third or fourth generation back, these people came from deep up country. They bought a little house in the border of our cities, and the children come to look for jobs. And if they don't get one, they begin shaping these things that are so difficult to resolve. Well, in my time as an agricultural unionist, we had a study, and that is one unemployed in the campaign is for the state 20 times cheaper than if they lived in the city. We should pay more attention and help, so people should not necessarily leave. Not oblige them to stay, but yes, provide the conditions for them to stay if they wish.
There is the
need to work together to improve productivity, add value to products, and strengthen sanitary controls. We have to offer guarantees to the world. A country small like ours has no possibilities of commercial exchange. We are obliged to be much more thorough than our competitors. The program delineates a comprehensive approach for agricultural development to balance economic growth and environmental sustainability and social equity, recognizing the role of this sector in the Uruguayan economy. In this area, it is indispensable when we speak about the future is to look for the legacy of three figures which molded very deeply our vision of agriculture. Wilson Ferreira Aldunate, Minister of Agriculture of Uruguay before the dictatorship, Juan Pablo Terra, senator and social researcher, both part of the committee led by Enrique Iglesias in 1962, and José Mujica Cordano, former Minister of Agriculture and former President of Uruguay. The latter modeled our political way of acting. Wilson Ferreira, at times of polarization and dictatorship, reminded us the strategic importance of the agricultural sector for the national economy. His productivistic approach centered on modernization and technology propelled us to take a look at the world and be providers of quality food. But his legacy goes beyond production. His defense of democracy and fight against oppression still at the heart of many rural producers and all of our fellow countrymen. Juan Pablo Terra, with his deep concern for social justice, mentioned the inequality in the countryside, land as a social good, not only economic. He opposed the importance of having an agrarian reform. Economic growth has to be hand in hand with equity and environmental sustainability. And former President Mujica, with his experience of life and commitment with the more vulnerable, has given us a more humane view. His defense of family agriculture and agroecological production invites us to rethink our productive model, value the fact of being deep-rooted in the land. His discourse against consumerism and the impact of our actions upon planet, those three leaders, from their own points of view, have left a legacy which is priceless. They have reminded us that agro-livestock is more than an economic sector. It has to do with our identity, our history, and our future. They have taught us that production, social justice, and sustainability are not antagonistic, but fundamental pillars of a comprehensive rural development. I didn't want to put politics to the fore because I think great men do not belong to just one party, but they belong to the nation. And in view of the challenges of climate change and globalization, the need of feeding the population, we need a more productive, fair, and sustainable agro that honors our tradition, that protects natural resources, and guarantees a prosperous future for coming generations. At least we are clear that the countryside we work on is something we have borrowed from our children. As someone who observes this landscape, the new strategy of prosperity by CAF is a transcendental step, Mr. President, and very timely in a global context marked by food uncertainty and environmental challenges. So this is a beacon of hope for the region. The strategy tackles the fundamental pillars for sustainable development, food security, rural development, which is inclusive, and innovation in bioeconomy by focusing on sustainable production, which is resilient and regenerative. CAF just wants to guarantee access to nutritious food for present and future generations, and it promotes the preservation of our natural resources. It's worth noting the emphasis in rural development, but with inclusion. These communities, usually marginal, are key to produce food and the preservation of biodiversity. By strengthening or building capacities and having access to resources and markets, there is an equitable and sustainable development, generating a positive impact on the lives of millions of people. So the bet on bioeconomy and innovation opens so many opportunities for the region. The production of new bioproducts, bioinputs, and bioenergy doesn't only diversify the productive matrix, but also reduces the dependence on solid fuels and promotes agricultural practices that are more friendly to the environment. In sum, the strategy of prosperity of CAF is ambitious and necessary to have a more prosperous, agricultural, sustainable future in Latin America and the Caribbean. Its success will depend on collaboration amongst all of the players involved: government, private sector, social, civil society, rural communities, etc. And this is our obligation to raise awareness and take it to the agricultural world. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ministro Frati,
Thank
por
you
sus
very
palabras.
much, Minister Frati, for your words. Next, we will present CAF strategy for agro-livestock prosperity. I'm going to call Ignacio Lorenzo, Director of Biodiversity CAF, and Maximiliano Alonso, both representative of the editorial committee that worked on the device of the strategy. Maximiliano, Ignacio, recognized.
Buenas tardes a todas y todos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Ministro, señor presidente, señores
Mr.
vicepresidentes.
Ministers, President, Vice President, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Bueno, toca un poco la parte más técnica de la sesión.
Now
de
we
hoy,
have the more technical aspect of the session to introduce the content of the new strategy of prosperity. The first, a more logistic message. All of you have received this QR code with the strategy. If you are following by streaming, cioteca.caf.com to download it. We decided to use this format. Well, the environmental team, the least we print, the better. And also for those who are outside, it is good to remove 1 kilogram from your suitcase. Well, the strategy shouldn't be a book in a library or in a drawer, but it has to be close to all of you who are leaders in the sector, in the region. And as our president said, this content, this vision we are presenting is at the disposal of countries, ministries, private sector to continue building prosperity together. And before starting, just as our moderator said, we've got the honor with Maxi to present this on behalf of the editorial committee that's been working on CAF. If you allow me, I want to name Efran Rojas, Andrea Roset, Juan Adriasola, Nelson Larrea, Miguel Guzmán, Ezequiel Garatro, the team of Diversity, Gender Inclusion, directors. Well, on behalf of them and the team, it's been a tremendous honor to be working with you.
Bien, nuestro presidente ejecutivo en su intervención nos daba un panorama de números.
Secretary gave us a landscape of very important numbers for the region, especially this concept of being the main net exporter in the world. And by far, these figures are very impressive. And this is an opportunity for the sector and for this concept of prosperity. And this happens in a very particular setting, in a climate, environmental moment, problems of food security. See that in the numbers of the region.
Que teníamos un 28% de inseguridad alimentaria.
28% of food insecurity, a region that produces food to export for the world, and that is in debt with its own population. And in a sub-regional context, such as the Caribbean, where 59% of the population suffer a certain kind of food or nutritional insecurity. Regarding the environmental aspect, Latin America and the Caribbean have made much progress in matters of climate mitigation, especially the energy subsector. It is the region with more clean energies in the world. But in the agricultural and livestock sector, usually associated to deforestation, it implies that 58% of emissions are in this sector. And this sector is also in relation to the variety of ecosystems and biodiversity, loss of biodiversity and loss of ecosystems. So this poses challenges. Number one, in terms of demand for food because of population growth and the economic growth in some regions, which implies more consumption of food, and geopolitical complexities, for example, access to markets, integration to the value chain, environmental issues, mitigation, climate adaptation, biodiversity, ecosystem management, losses and waste of food, and the need of institutional building, comprehensive policies, development of infrastructure, and in the context of a strategic opportunity for the region that implies productive development, strategic development based on nature and the richness of our region. What about the strategy? There was an important bet on the indications of President and Vice President, which was an internal work. That is, with all of the value offer of CAF, the different sectors, infrastructures, social, environmental, areas, and to have a comprehensive approach that we need in terms of public policy and external action, collaborative action, a joint action with FAO, ICA, FIDA, PMA, 4 institutions which during the process putting together the strategy were able to exchange, and the experts of those institutions have collaborated, has helped improve this strategy. So we're very thankful for that. We think that this strategy is under a more broader framework. Our strategy to identify that we collaborate practically with all of the SDGs and also the frames of action in the Convention Against Climate Change, the Convention Against Certification, the Convention for the Protection of Biodiversity, and of course the SANCELAC Plan of Action for food security and the Global Alliance of G20 to go against hunger and poverty. This strategy allows to deploy and act in the region. And inside CAF, this implies articulation, integration with the different key strategies, in particular our corporate strategy 2022-2026 that implies that the bank will position itself as a green bank and sustainable development, which is inclusive and mission across the board and enabling missions, energy transition, ecosystems, territories. This strategy will deploy all of those strategies in a comprehensive and joint manner.
The President also mentioned that this action by CAF is not new. CAF accumulates history and action over the years, and with the analysis that we've done of investment in the last 15 years, we can speak of an investment of $4.3 billion in terms of agricultural prosperity in the region. And this integrally and with that capital of action allows us to think and present and project ourselves even further. In particular, regarding the value proposal, how does CAF wish to stand in terms of the institutional ecosystem and these alliances, FAO, ICA, and others, generating knowledge? The President mentioned the network next year, the rural world, and also technical assistance. CAF provides resources and technical assistance to countries, and this implies an improvement in the capacity for public policy and have a greater impact. And lastly, and I think that this is something that sets us aside, that CAF is placed strategically for collaboration, a deployment of financial instruments, innovative, diverse. CAF today has a broad array, as you can see here in the strategy, of financial instruments, sovereign as well as non-sovereign, that constantly develop innovation, generate new elements, particularly in recent years in green matters, environmental matters, that somehow allow us to generate actions in the territory of countries with a vision not only of an impact in what we're proposing for action, but also financing adapted to those solutions. And this implies, for example, guarantees or a loan at a particular term or conditions to ensure the efficacy and the impact on the territory. And that in our conversations with agencies and often with the producers themselves, you need that diversity to somehow provide a solution made to measure to the sector in each country, a sector that is tremendously heterogeneous. And then, speaking the scope, this is something we spoke a lot about with our colleagues. First of all, reaffirm the integral systemic approach throughout the entire value chain, all the way from the consumer, from the producer to the consumer. A circular economy approach, considering fishery, livestock, forestry, and in food products as well as non-food products. In this action regarding bioeconomy as an opportunity unique for the region of Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of economic and knowledge development. And also these two concepts somehow marked our construction. First, prosperity, as I mentioned earlier, as a concept that somehow is hopeful, an approach not only economic, but seeks to read the reality of people in rural areas, to generate a vision, as the minister said, that might endure, because they want to endure, that they want to produce and build this idea of integration even in urban areas. And second, within this concept of the items mentioned, the challenges in environmental matters, a lot has to do with agriculture, thinking of agricultural production that is sustainable, resilient, and regenerative. And these three concepts, although linked, each one is very specific. Of course, sustainability, a concept that we are all clear as to the scope, but still in practice is far from being realized. The economic, social, and environmental matters matters, resilience, in particular in an agricultural sector that produces in the open sky, is at the mercy of the climate but also of prices. Somehow a sector that is sensitive and must be able to overcome these shocks, whether climate or economic based, and regenerative, because the region of LAC is in a substrate of strategic ecosystems that are unique, and that production should not only not affect the ecosystem, but on the contrary, the functionality of the systems are able to ensure agriculture that is strong and resilient and that will be maintained towards the future. So CAF must collaborate, support, and position itself with this approach, thinking of people, but also production that is environmentally sustainable. Well, I'll leave it at that. My colleagues and friends, thank you.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I too would like to thank all teams who have been working. It has been very intense, hard, but we have learned a lot. I will speak of the vision, mission, and the structures. The structure of the strategy. But before beginning with the vision, I would like to mention 3 points that we use throughout the mission. 3 paradigms that have to do with being reactive to proactive, structured coordination, and moving from competition to complementation. This will help us for the strategy to have a different impact, not run off to resolve issues, but think it over first. Coordination. We are linked. We have internal relations within CAF among management divisions, or also we're related to various instances, but we want a structured link, a space where we can dialogue in a different way and plan jointly. And moving from competition to complementation, this has to do with that. Alone, it's difficult to do the things that we're talking about. It is important for us, throughout what we've done, to work together as we are doing here. Let's strengthen the activity, let's strengthen the possibility, and have strategic alliances strong, as we are having already with ICA, FAO, among other agencies, FIA and others. And so now let's move on to the vision. For 2035, CAF wishes to be consolidated as the main financial driver of the region for agricultural prosperity in Latin America and the Caribbean. Of course, playing a strategic role in the transformation of the sector, promoting sustainable production, resilient and regenerative, as Nacho was saying, and that ensures food security. For us, this is essential. But also this will allow us for Latin America to be consolidated in its position as a region determinant in providing solutions to the major global challenges. Of course, the vision is linked to the mission. That mission is drive prosperity, agricultural prosperity in Latin America and the Caribbean. By deploying financial instruments that are diverse, innovative, providing technical assistance, knowledge platforms, supporting public policy, and strengthening strategic alliances. Is no simple mission. It is not a complex mission. It is realizable. Of course, CAF's commitment is not only with financing, but also technical assistance, knowledge, and public policy. The strategic aims stem from the mission and are support, transformation, transition, and prosperity. As we are saying, ensuring adaptation and resilience before the current and future challenges. From these strategic objectives, we have specific aims such as strengthening and ensuring food and nutritional security, contributing to the development of rural territories, and promoting sustainable, resilient, and regenerative agricultural production. Now, how will we do this? Specifically, we have strategic pillars and lines of action related to these strategic pillars. The pillars represent priority areas for CAF, where CAF is focused and focuses its efforts for integral transformation of the agricultural sector, all the way from rural territories to the infrastructure to maintain this objective. Here you can see how the strategic lines are linked to each pillar. You can see it by the color: production, social well-being, resilient territories, physical and digital infrastructure, integration, and cross-cutting ones such as gender. This is like a special segment that we have highlighted that the President always mentions, and that is coffee. In this case, we give the example of Honduras. We were just talking to Miguel. The President, are there 16 or 18 CAF countries? 17 CAF countries that produce coffee. I think that if you have experience in working with other international agencies, especially in the area of financing, this is a reinforcement of what coffee growing means in the region. 17 countries of Latin America produce coffee, and Honduras is a very special case. It's not the greatest producer, but the third in the region and sixth worldwide. What coffee growing means in these countries, a lot. In this country specifically, 20% of GDP is generated by coffee. It's not just a cultural matter, it is a social one. It is a matter that right now could deeply affect migration. This is essential right now in the Central American region. We, with CAF, what we are doing is supporting small farmers through financing possibilities and local development banking for them to produce more, better, with added value, and be on their land, stay where they are, that they should not need to migrate towards a more developed province, and that their children may learn rural coffee growing. It's ancestral and so important to the region. The support is such. And how is this being integrated towards a strategy? There was the first CELAC Coffee Summit, supported by CAF, also the FAO, FAO, ICA, CELAC. We've been working jointly, and I believe that we could strengthen this even further. In April, we were finishing the contemporary presidency of Honduras, and Colombia will be coming in. And we need to strengthen this, and I think that CAF will work on that aspect. We speak to you of Honduras because we're doing a lot of work there. We will work in other areas, but CAF's disposition is powerful. And lastly, the targets. That at the end of the day, everything can be summed up. And now we're going to talk about some targets, but you can find in what Nacho distributed. We have a strategy that's about 100 pages long. And very interesting, but it's a bit too much to read. As you can see, we're waging greatly on mobilizing resources, and we're hoping to place $8.5 billion by 2030, with a first target of $5.5 billion by 2026. Second, Food security. Another thing that we're talking about, it is a key pillar. Our aim is that by 2030, more than 10 million people in the region may access stable food and nutritional food, not just food. And by 2026, reach 3 million beneficiaries, giving priority to rural communities and vulnerable communities.
Every project funded by CAF will have components of adaptation, mitigation to climate change by 2030, 100%, and in the short run, 2026, we commit for 90% meet these criteria. So by 2030, I think we're going to be able to achieve 100%. Number 4, we know that access to water is a key process, not only for human consumption, but also irrigation and for agriculture is fundamental. So our goal is to include irrigation systems in 55,000 hectares by 2030. That will have a lot of impact in the short run. We will focus to enable 15,000 hectares promoting water efficiency and reuse. Point 5 or goal 5, all of the projects should have regenerative practices by 2030, 100%. We want to implement in at least 2 projects reference by 2026, showing that it is possible to produce by taking care of and protecting the environment. Goal 6 will ensure that half of the new projects include enabling infrastructure, irrigation, roads, digitization, and access to market. By 2026, we will have a well-defined roadmap where at least 4 subnational territories will be key. Number 7, and this is important because this has to do with the new regions, which are Central America and the Caribbean. We want to consolidate and balance the financing amongst regions, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. We want to double the portfolio by 2030 and increase by 50% by 2026. And the last is related to the relationships we are establishing beyond financial resources to build capacity and governance. By 2030, we want an infrastructure of relations, as we call it, in the region, which is robust with working groups, financial instruments, technical assistance, and strengthened institutions. And to close, goals. These goals are a before and after in CAF. We think that in the agro-livestock sector, we do not only want to transform the agriculture, but territories, communities, ecosystems by ensuring sustainable and inclusive prosperity towards 2030. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Maximiliano Ignacio.
Thank you, Maximiliano and Ignacio, for giving us details about this strategy that is key for the future of our region. And to continue, we invite dialogue for the future. We invite moderator Alicia Montalvo, manager of Climate Action, and our panel members, Joaquín Ariaica, the American Institute of Cooperation for Agriculture, João Intine from FAO, and Gonzalo Uriarte, Association of Food and Beverages of Chile.
Ahora aparece.
Ahí sí, ahí sí.
Muchísimas gracias y bueno, sabemos que la sesión está
Thank you
siendo
very
muy
much.
rica
We
en
know that this
información y muy
session is very rich in information and quite intensive, but we wanted to hold this conversation with three persons that represent institutions that have been key to produce this strategy. It's been emphasized a lot the importance of external collaboration. Yeah, we have two institutions that, well, one of them is our host, and they're being key for the work we have done. And ICA, which for us is a very important ally, and collaboration has been fundamental.
John Marcelo
Intini on FAO is agronomist with a long experience, about 30 years in matters of rural development, food security, nutritional security, markets, supply, and has also experience in the ministries of Brazil. He leads the agenda FAO for agro-food. And on ICA, we have Joaquín Arias. He's in the seat of ICA in Panama, technical specialist with hemispheric responsibilities, and he coordinates the Observatory of Public Policies for Agro-Food Systems. He's an agricultural economist and has much experience in rural development with 30-year experience, international trade, and several publications. Welcome. And of course, the private sector, which is also key for a strategy of prosperity that takes into consideration the importance of enterprises and the private sector. That's why we have Gonzalo Uriarte Herrera, president of the Association of Foods and Beverages of Chile. He's a lawyer with experience in agro-food and in the public and private sector. And I would like to highlight he's the director of packaging. I would like to speak about the past, what the most important challenges that the institutions had to deal with, but also take a look at the future. The way in which we have to work, and maybe give some inspiring message to the public before listening to the closing by Vice President Asinelli. Well, first of all, FAO supports countries of the region development of policies in agro-food. I would like you to tell us what have been the main action points in recent years.
Muy buenas tardes o muy buenas noches.
Good afternoon or good evening. Thank you, Alicia. Dear panel members, Eve, ministers, authorities of CAF and other colleagues of FAO.
Tengo 4 minutos, correto?
I have just 4 minutes, right?
Uma pergunta que nos traz bastante
a question that brings us to reflection on our work, but FAO has organized its framework with something very interesting that opens a very intense portfolio to work. So we have topics such as production, nutrition, environment, etc. So we organize to act with governments, with the different organizations of the public and private sector, important partners such as CAF and others such as ICA, academia, and other centers of the organized society. So this portfolio is at the avant-garde of our challenges. Try to summarize our action is not simple. We could always leave something behind when we want to summarize, but it is important to emphasize some important elements within the framework of nutrition. Everything that has been done in terms of the school food and what was mentioned by our ministers, everything that has been done to establish a dialogue for trade that is in accordance with the interests of our countries. I can't read, unfortunately. And regarding rural and territorial work, there is a big concern of giving subjects an important role because they are necessary to correct something that was left behind when we tried to develop this, but we didn't include people, gaps between men and women. Gaps also in the case of youngsters, which was previously mentioned. Everything we see is very complicated for indigenous populations, Afro-descendant populations. FAO tries to help face those externalities and give a face and a voice so that they are the true protagonists of a development that makes us be different. I mean, there are very good lessons and practices, but a lot has been done that should have been done in a different way. It was mentioned important measures, everything that has been said regarding socioeconomic integration, there is still much to do about it. Production, we are perfectly in line with prosperity that was announced here. And I want to congratulate CAF for summoning us to speak about this topic. There are such absurd inequities. To speak about prosperity puts us in a place of human beings rather than leaders or managing directors. We are humans in a very unequal world in terms of production, sustainable livestock, agriculture, silviculture, and taking care of soils, forests, everything that is in relation to digital and technological inclusion, which has been a very big gap in the rural area. There is enormous concentration of technologies, credits, technical assistance, insurance to one part of growers. But the other part, those who live in the rural world, do not receive those public policies. There is asymmetry, and those asymmetries are within the agro-food systems. When you speak about which systems we are putting together, we have to face first the asymmetries that are quite clear. And as the minister said, we have to try and give all equal opportunity. On environment, closing with this, my dear friends, we have worked with the government so as to be able to act, to protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of resources, biodiversity, forests, and all of the characteristics of our region that were already mentioned. But FAO can't do this on its own. We are going on uncharted waters, circular economy, all of that is summoning us to think in a different way. We will think a different way when we work with CAF, EICA, private sector, and other important organizations for funding, also the academia and other agencies of the UN and public and private entities that try to partner to face those challenges. I could mention so many more, CARICOM, SICA, GIVIN, BRICS, so many other important initiatives. But also listening to the answers of my colleagues, but FAO has been a protagonist. As Yves said, we commemorate 80 years. We have to look back what we have contributed to the planet, but we still have a lot to do. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Importantísima reflexión.
Thank you. Very important thoughts. And now move on to Joaquin on the work done by the Observatory of Public Policy for the Food Systems the information gathered, which would be the three main challenges that you see for the region?
Muchas gracias. Buenas
Well,
noches.
thank you and good evening. It is an honor to be here in this stage. I was thinking, while we've been talking about the agricultural sector in Latin America, what can I say now that's different? And how to speak among the converted, because everyone is convinced in the direction to go. So I was thinking that, first of all, we should make an effort to communicate what the agricultural sector is doing to the rest of the community, the politician. And so what we need is a new narrative, a different way of projecting our sector. In terms of the contribution by the agri-food sector, we've already seen the figures today during the presentation of the strategy, but I would add a few more. For example, in the last decade, the agricultural sector grew in Latin America 2.5%. Far more than the rest of the economy that grew 2.3, and the agri-food less volatile than the rest of the economy because it is an essential sector for the life of people. And the other thing is that when we measure the contribution, sometimes we talk of the primary sector and not the agricultural sector. So the contribution by the sector in terms of employment, it could be up to 40% in some countries of the region. So if we add all activities related to the agri-food sector. The other important thing is that the sector contributes with 26% to total exports of Latin America and the Caribbean. So it is an important. So when we speak of food security, I feel that sometimes we approach it from the negative side, not highlighting the fact that the region produces a surplus of 28% calories. It is a region that produces far more than is necessary, and the problem of food security fundamentally is a matter of access and distribution, and it depends not only on our agri-food sector. In terms of climate change, the agri-food sector has many opportunities of collaborating and contributing to climate resilience with carbon capture, restoration of soils, we've mentioned this already, protection of basins, and preserving biodiversity. There's a 30 years of analysis measuring the contribution by emissions by the agricultural sector, and this has dropped from 9.4% to 5.5%. So we are moving ahead. We are moving ahead with all the measures that we have even spoken about here in agriculture, more sustainable production systems, direct sowing, better management of natural resources, and so on. And also I would like to say that at ICA, we supplement the message of Máximo Torero, who had to do with the role of agriculture. We say, without agriculture, there is no health, there is no food, there is no healthy environment, nor well-being in rural territories. And so what we want is for the sector to be more attractive to young people, more attractive for the banking sector, investors, and the governments themselves who support the sector. We need to project a better image, because if we speak only of problems, no one is going to see us. And this, despite the complexities that we've spoken about today, the profitability of the agricultural sector, but it depends on too many factors, as was said. Some that are within the control of the farmer, but others that are not. And so the farmers need far more public policy support by our organizations, the banking system, and so on. And I end with a message because I know that the cocktail is too near. And same as we ask the agri-food sector to transform, probably governments, states, policies must also transform. And that is why At ICA, we struggle. Together with a majority of institutions represented here, we're looking for a new generation of public policy very much focused on public goods to supplement everything that has been spoken about today. And probably we're going to see a turnaround towards policies that are based on subsidies, go from policies based on subsidies to policies that encourage the rural work. So let's give incentives to improve the soil, to improve the living conditions, to be clear regarding the results that we pursue and provide incentives for that. And if you think about it, the complexity of this transformation that we seek is great. And what we need is an appropriate and sufficient investment and in the long term. We cannot do it if it's only going to be short term. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Very interesting, positive view, and you've shared some figures that were interesting. Gonzalo, now could you elaborate on that? What is the value of the sector as a key economic pillar in the region, but also here in Chile? Can you speak to us of your knowledge of this sector in Chile?
A riesgo
At the risk of spending my time, I would like to begin by greeting our hosts and especially thank the invitation by the CAF president and his team, the president and his team, and of course the minister. It is no joke that so many authorities be here at this time of the day in person at an event such as this. And to all of you, I would like to thank you for your presence. There is no doubt that this is a very dynamic sector, fundamental not only for the supply of food, but very important to encourage export and growth of local economies. Just to show the dynamism of the sector, I would like to share global data and local data. Globally, we've said it. This is a sector that is able to feed 1.3 billion people. We must also say it, that it has grown. The agri-food sector in the region has grown more than the rest of the world. And that maybe seems obvious, but it's not really that obvious. From 6.6 to 7.6 approximately, there is a significant difference. This is a vigorous sector that, despite all the issues related to the climate and economic ups and downs, is nevertheless able to grow. And having said that, I would like to come down to the local reality, Chile. Last year, the central bank told us that the economy grew, well, what it grew, 2.6%. But an important part of that growth was exports, 6.6%, mining and fruit, cherries and grapes. And that is also very important. I'm going to send you a notice. The sector I represent, food, represents 4% of our GDP in Chile and generates 500,000 jobs. But above all, it has a major incidence on a series of other sectors and activities, beginning with small-scale farming, family farming, peasant farming that the minister spoke to us about, but also medium-scale farming, and also the truckers and those who make the packaging for food and those who distribute fertilizer and inputs for agriculture. There is a catalyzing impact that is tremendous. And that is why, really, I would like to revindicate this, and with this I conclude, the role of the private sector in the development of the agricultural sector. Truly, it is very important, it is tangible, it is measurable, there are indicators, and so I congratulate CAF for daring to set up the topic as a priority. We're long-standing for countries and is be able to transform public policy, and that you will be able to see and follow that they do. Well, thank you very much. I think that we will keep a minute to address some of the topics that are such an important part of the pillars presented today, related to climate change, that you already spoke about that, sustainability. So I would like to ask you, could you sum up which would be for you the fundamental aspect to bear in mind right now when the environmental challenges and the political context regarding these topics is so relevant and marks the actions in public policy?
Muchas gracias. Alicia, una pregunta.
Well, thank you.
Quisiera partir pouco sobre.
I'd like to begin
algumas reflexões sobre a pandemia.
With thoughts about the pandemic. And we can continue talking about that, I don't know, for how many years. The impact, the influence on our lives, food systems, agri-food systems. But after the pandemic, we try to see and feel the impact of the war in Ukraine that reveals how our agri-food systems and chains, value chains, all energy systems, inputs, every chain of supplies that supports the agricultural sector was fairly imbalanced in the sense that a shock or a stress of that size tragically led to a food crisis. The price of food increased and was internalized in our countries, regardless of the fact that we see that international prices, especially basic foods or basic group foods, milk and meat, and they're coming down. But why do they not come down for families and people? People look at us and they say, well, why the eggs, why the honey, the tomatoes? Every time there's a sort of villain that pushes us to think, why are we paying so much for food that we eat? If at the end of the day, we're here seeing the farm just kilometers away from the city, we see the fruit and the produce is being exported, but as they say here, we cannot meet the needs of our own people. So this has to do with geopolitics. That has to do with the political balances. That essentially has to do with the possibility of each country to develop within the framework of a sovereignty or an autonomy, depending on how you see the situations, but develop public policy that attempt to place people as the top priority. And I think that governments don't think that way. Maybe they do, but they don't need to materialize things so that ultimately people are in the front line as the top priority. Obviously, we're talking about the system that mobilizes millions, as was well said here. And sometimes the agri-business, yes, links millions of people, but if we see the food system, and in each urban area, we will see 3 billion people. So we are not so important. So I think that we need to design another platform for dialogue involving all multilateral space and instances, face unilateral positions to procure discussions about topics that are more cross-cutting and multiplayer, so to speak, so that ultimately we may design public policy that include the various needs of populations. A difficult question, but I believe that we're going through a very important moment in our planet with incredible uncertainties and many great challenges, either due to policies or climate change. Thank you. Gonzalo, the private sector, how does it address the challenge of sustainability? What initiatives you spoke of? Packaging, that is an essential topic, yes, but what else would you highlight in this area?
De una manera muy responsable. Nosotros asumimos esto como
In
una
a
tarea
responsible manner. For us, this is a very serious task, and this forces us to review industrial processes, agricultural practices, to be more conscious and efficient, taking care of water resources and energy. So as an industry, we have made a very big effort to be more efficient and at the same time introduce continuous improvement processes in different areas, applying innovation, technology, AI, data management so as to optimize processes of traceability, food safety, improve efficiency. So there are so many things you can improve by being much more sustainable, consuming less and less plastics, and be aware that all of the products containers are recyclable, that most of the waste can be recycled. I mean, migrating to a circular economy, a true circular economy, conscious, aware of the environment, pretty much connected to the water and climate crisis. Thank you very much. And to close, and a lot has been said about collaboration and the importance of collaborative strategies such as CAF. We will give you the floor, Joaquin, for you to tell us in what way this can contribute to develop policies more based on sustainability. Thank you. Well, we're working with several institutions. CAF has been in this process right from the start. To see what we can imagine with new public policies. What is the institutionality we need? We can't continue with the same ministries to solve all of the problems we have. Policy instruments shouldn't be the same. And someone said that there is no policy in Latin America because it is the one that is accompanied by resources, instruments. Not all of the countries could demonstrate that they have policies. But I wanted to stress one point we all have to work on. It is said that what is not measured doesn't improve. And many of the things we have mentioned today cannot be measured, not even profitability. Commodities prices go down, fertilizers go down, but not at the same pace as commodity prices decline. So there could be a problem of profitability, productivity. We do not know. We do not have systems in Latin America that measure the status of profitability in the agro sector. And we don't know whether we're going to be able to increase productivity in a sustainable manner. We, at the same time, have to improve contribution to the environment. I think there is still a lot of work to do. We have to invest more on data and digitizing agro. Why don't we digitize governments? It is so difficult to know what every government is doing, what they're spending their money in. Digitizing public policy is an effort we make at the observatory to monitor what we do, how we do it, and the impact of what we do. So we all have to be in tune. Thank you very much. We have to recognize that this is a very dynamic sector with a tremendous economic importance. We must be able to measure it, observe it, but we have to give voice to the most vulnerable ones and listen everyone along the value chain, and they have to benefit from the prosperity we have been discussing. Thank you very much, and I understand that we needed more time, but thank you very much for participating in this panel.
Muchísimas gracias, Alicia,
Thank
Gonzalo.
you very much, Alicia, Gonzalo, Joao, and Joaquín, for your participation in this panel.
Y ya entrando en la parte final,
and now to close, and before going to the cocktail, wait for our side, we invite Cristina Sinelli, Corporate Vice President of CAF, to close this event.
Bueno, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas noches. Ya quedó en claro con Alicia y
Good
ahora
evening. It's clear with Alicia and the moderator that I am what is between you and the cocktail. But I would like to be brief. I want to thank first the ministers who have been with us, institutional allies, FAO, ICA, private sector, and a special thanks to the executive president of CAF, who has encouraged us to work internally into all of the sectors of the organization in this strategy that is so important that Ignacio Maxi presented. So I'm not going to go into details. We're closing a very long day that started early in the morning with two parallel seminars, one about regional integration, and at the same time, we were another seminar about security. Then we continued with meetings with the Chilean governors, a seminar on a response to emergency. Am I forgetting something? Well, and now we're closing the day with this seminar about agro-prosperity. The Minister of Uruguay named President Mujica. President Mujica has come up in several of these seminars. So this shows his presence in the region and his work that has been doing for so many years. And what he's doing to raise awareness of many of the topics we mentioned today and that we are discussing now in a world that faces big challenges and climate erosion, loss of fertility of agricultural soils, food security. And Sergio says that Latin America and the Caribbean are a solution for the global problems, biological biodiversity, fertile groundwater resources, technological innovation, human talent, etc. is the half full glass. Now, in the half empty glass, we could mention gaps in poverty, inequity, and food. Being a region that can feed so many, as the Minister of Uruguay said, so many people has food insecurity. So we are proposing this strategy that has to be comprehensive, must allow to articulate more returns for our countries from the standpoint of the work in private sector. That was clear in the last panel. We have to work to produce financial instruments that are innovative, to coordinate amongst all of the agencies, FAO, ICA, CAF, other development banks, the joint work we can do, taking into account infrastructure, roads, water, all of the topics that are key. And so as to work on this across the board,
Creemos que es parte de nuestra acción.
That it is part of our action to link the different projects to generate a holistic agenda, a global agenda, with projects that have to do with agriculture, such as construction of satellites in Argentina, ARSAT-1, ARSAT-2, Aviamar, that improve the quality of soils, better understand productivity, how to work with the private sector. Project is such as Argentina against hunger, nutrition in Ecuador, and also support to initiatives such as the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. We worked in G20 on the initiatives of the government of Brazil. And as Ignacio and Maximiliano said, becoming a multilateral bank that can keep contributing to closing gaps, strengthening our regional food security, the Latin America and the Caribbean be a region, as our president says, that is the focus, that can transcend, be part of the solution of the global problems. Well, this is not carved in stone. We're going to keep working on this internally and with our allies. It requires commitment and coordinated work of our areas, and also the pool efforts and much more global view that helps us be the green bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. I think we are achieving that, but we have to include also, as the Minister Uruguay said, the rural sector, small size growers, cultures, all of those were part of its development. This is what we have come to do today, and I'm sure that this progress, this prosperity they mentioned is going to be possible only if we do this together to generate a sustainable, resilient, regenerative agriculture. Since I'm Argentinian, I like to quote Pope Francis, we're all together rowing the same boat. And today, right now, after he's leaving the hospital, we send him all of our energy, our force, prayers, whatever. Well,
de sabiduría para seguir en este camino y trabajar en conjunto para
provide us with wisdom to work together and make the changes. Now, let's go to the cocktail. Thank you.
Agradecemos al vicepresidente Cristiana Sinelli.
We thank Vice President Cristiana Sinelli. We thank all of you who have been with us today in person and through the streaming. It's a pleasure to have had you in this very important milestone. And as we leave on the screens, we will see the video especially prepared to present this prosperity project. Thank you very much.
Promover una producción agropecuaria sostenible, resiliente y regenerativa como un pilar fundamental para abordar la seguridad alimentaria y nutricional, a nivel local, regional y global, es el principal objetivo de la nueva estrategia de prosperidad agropecuaria de CAF para América Latina y el Caribe, y así posicionar a nuestra región como una fuente de soluciones ante los desafíos alimentarios y ambientales globales. Nuestra región provee de alimento a más de 1.300 millones de personas, consolidándose como el principal exportador neto de alimentos a nivel global. Sin embargo, este sector vital se enfrenta a desafíos crecientes que amenazan su sostenibilidad, como los impactos negativos del cambio climático y las restricciones al comercio
and restrictions to international trade exacerbated by geopolitical tensions that limit access to markets and made it difficult for prices to be stable. Additionally, there are the structural changes such as the need to improve competitiveness of the sector, promoting inclusion and well-being in urban and rural communities, and adopt productive practices that are more sustainable. Through this new strategy, CAF, Bank of Development of Latin America and the Caribbean, proposes a prosperity approach to accelerate and give guidance to the mobilization of resources towards food security through the preservation and restoration of strategic ecosystems and the development of territories of the region. How? Well, through investments that aim at the whole value chain, from primary production to commercialization and consumption of food products from livestock, agriculture, fishing, and other products, such as biomaterials, biomass, biofuels, and bioinputs, through strategic partnerships with key players internationally and regionally, with the public and private sector, organizations of producers, civil society, and the scientific community. The strategy seeks to face challenges that affect sustainability, such as the persistence of a structural inequality of the different rural territories and social exclusion, the growing pressure on natural resources, urgency of going towards high productivity models, low greenhouse gas emissions, resilient to climate, deficiencies in the management of ecosystems, high losses and waste of food, insufficient levels of investment in infrastructure and innovation, barriers of access to market, and the need to build capabilities in the sector. This framework details strategies and initiatives of CAF and the way in which they have contributed to food and nutritional security, water safety, regeneration of ecosystems, physical and digital infrastructure, management of disaster risk, gender equality, inclusion and diversity, financial inclusion and private investment, and regional integration. The value proposal by CAF for prosperity is based on its capability to mobilize funding through multiple financial instruments, generating knowledge, promoting innovation, and facilitating collaboration amongst different players. An ambitious view, clear view, a general objective focused on fostering the transformation to a more sustainable model, resilient and regenerative, with specific objectives, including food and nutrition security, with a focus on family agriculture. Finally, ambitious goals are established for 2026 and 2030, which will allow to measure the progress and ensure its contribution to prosperity of the region, including reaching $8.5 billion investment by 2030 and benefiting directly more than 10 million Latin Americans and Caribbeans, making CAF the main regional engine, supporting a more sustainable, cultural, resilient, and regenerative model for the benefit of the whole population and nature. CAF, Bank of Development of Latin America and the Caribbean.